The Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt remains closed this morning as hundreds of Canadians and their families try to leave. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah today as he continues to tour the region. Arab leaders have been urging the U.S. to convince Israel there needs to be a ceasefire, but Blinken says a ceasefire would only allow Hamas to regroup and attack Israel again. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has thoughts on how to bring peace to the region. Olmert led the country from 2006 to 2009. He was Prime Minister during Israel's war with Lebanon and Deputy Prime Minister when Israel withdrew its soldiers and settlers from Gaza. I spoke to Olmert earlier this morning about Israel's response, the future of Gaza, and Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership. Former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in the West Bank today. As you know, Arab leaders have asked Blinken to push Israel towards a ceasefire. What do you make of that request?
I think that there may be a certain discrepancy between the public requests and the actual interest of the Arab countries. I think that none of the Arab countries that I'm familiar with, and that includes, by the way, the Palestinian Authority, also the Jordan, Egypt, and others, none of them want Israel to stop the war against Hamas before Hamas is eradicated. Let's not get it wrong. Hamas is the enemy of all the Arab moderate countries. Hamas is the harshest enemy of Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president. He is an enemy of Jordan, he is an enemy of Egypt. Hamas is an enemy of every moderate country that wants to have stability and peace and reconciliation with the state of Israel, that's for sure. They want something entirely different. They want to upset the entire region. They want to change the balance. They are serving the Iranians, they are serving the extremist Ayatollahs, the fundamentalists, and the zealots, the religious zealots. And that's something which most of the Arab countries are quite scared of. They are not capable of spelling it out because of the very sensitive and fragile public opinion within the Arab countries, which may be sometimes emotionally inclined to support these movements, the terrorist movements. That's precisely why all of these Arabs want Israel to eradicate Hamas.
There is, though, Mr. Olmert, obviously calls for humanitarian pauses or corridors, things that can be done to help the Palestinians inside Gaza. What, as a former prime minister, do you think should be happening on that front right now?
We definitely should help the Palestinian citizens in Gaza with humanitarian supply. By the way, that doesn't include necessarily fuel. They want fuel. Hamas wants fuel. They have reserves of hundreds of thousands of liters, which are sufficient for the use of the population. But they want fuel for the war machine of the Hamas, and that's not something that we can acquiesce with or support. But all the humanitarian needs of the population are now transferred into Gaza from Egypt. We allow more than 100 trucks every day. We are loaded with food and all the other supplies to come to Gaza. And we also will arrange to have transitory hospitals outside of the center of towns, because all of the hospitals in Gaza, one must understand, are at the background level, are the centers of Hamas, the headquarters of Hamas. But we are not going to stop the war against Hamas. We are going to try and break down Hamas because this is the interest of all the people that live in the region.
I know you. Yes. I know you have lots of thoughts about the Gaza Strip and what happens once the war is over. And I think a lot of people have questions about that. Who can or should take control of that territory once this is done?
My belief is that, number one, we have to appeal to the friends of Israel, to the European countries, to America first and foremost, but to Canada as well, and say to them, hey guys, if you don't want it to ever return again, if you want to have some kind of stability in this region, then we need to have an intervention military force that will take over at the end of the military operation of Israel, will come and take over in order to restore the civil administration in Gaza, in order to try and help rebuild some sections of city that definitely will suffer from destruction, and prepare Gaza for the takeover by the Palestinian Authority. So that's number one. Israel has to make it clear we are not interested in occupying Gaza. We pulled out from Gaza in 2005. We don't want to keep it, and we want to allow an international force for a interim period of time. Now, at the same time, Israel has to declare, and this is not something that the present Israeli government is prepared to do. Yeah. So all the friends of Israel that support Israel, and Anthony Blinken, and of course President Biden has to do it, is to demand that Israel will make a commitment that immediately after the end of the military operation, Israel will immediately start negotiations with the Palestinian Authority for the creation for the two-state solution. That is essential in order to change the balance and start and create a certain momentum that will lead into an entirely different situation. Israel has to do it. So this is my end game, and I think that it should be the end game of the Israeli government. And I'm not certain that the government will volunteer to do it unless it will be asked to do it by those who provide with the state of Israel now enormous support. President Biden and all our European friends, and your Prime Minister as well.
Well, that brings me to a question about Prime Minister Netanyahu and whether you think he can continue to lead the country after the war is over and do the very things that you're recommending happen in order to bring about peace.
What do you think, Tony? And it happened in any other countries that you are familiar with, like your country, like America, like others, that the Prime Minister or the leader would have prevailed. Prime Minister is held personally responsible for a wrong concept, for flirting with Hamas for over 15 years against his initial commitment when he took over, that the first thing that he will do is to destroy Hamas. Instead of destroying Hamas, he released more than 1,000 killers and murderers of Hamas, and some of those that were released are now the leaders of Hamas, including Yahya Sinwar, who is number one, and he was released by Netanyahu from jail. So he is, and from then on, instead of negotiating with the Palestinian Authority, which is not always very nice, and they are not, by the way, to the best of my knowledge, they are not members of any Zionist party. They are Palestinians, they represent the Palestinian people, but they are cooperating with Israel and the Israeli security authorities, and they are helping us to prevent terror in the West Bank. So instead of negotiating with them, which may have required also political concessions and territorial concessions that Netanyahu is not prepared to make, he negotiated and he prioritized the Hamas, and that's what he got back. So he is held personally responsible for a wrong concept, for a wrong attitude, and I don't think that he will prevail. So I think that his days in office are very few, and maybe possibly, I'm not certain about that he will have to retire even before the war is finished.
Let me end on this question, Mr. Olmert. Do you think peace is still possible? You got very close. You negotiated with Mahmoud Abbas. Do you think that peace is possible?
Peace is the most important thing for Israel. Therefore, it's possible. Nothing is impossible if you want it. Now, this government of Israel, I'm not certain that wants it. Therefore, it will have to be replaced by a government that will desire to have peace, and hopefully will find a partner in the other side that will not refrain from saying yes to generous Israeli proposals, as they did with me when I proposed to them peace. And they didn't have the guts and the courage and the vision and the enthusiasm to say, okay, we accept it. Had they done it at the end of 2008, we may have had peace already for quite a long time.
Former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, thank you for your time, sir.